Welcome along. This is Working Lunch. My name is James Mulvaney. You know the drill. Every single Wednesday we go live at 1 p.m. UK time. And Working Lunch has been specifically about bringing to you actionable strategies to grow your business, grow your audience, or grow your team. Now, we've kind of gone to a 3-month period, I think. February, March, and April, and May. 4 months. Do you know, we're just literally listing down everyone we've spoken to over the past few months, and the list is quite incredible. The variety and breadth of conversations that we've had has been really exciting, and I thank you all for watching and tuning in, especially if you've been, watching regularly and tuning in today. Now, today is actually such a nice day. I was actually considering trying to do this outside from my terrace. You can kind of see I'm a little bit red because I've been sat outside all morning on my laptop, but I thought it might be a bit hit and miss. The Wi-Fi is never as good outside, and also it's kind of quite hard to see the screen. So yeah, here we are. And I thought what I would do, as I say, is the last in the season. What I'm going to do is take a little break from Working Lunch, because as I say, we've been doing it every single Wednesday. I don't think we've missed a single Wednesday since like the 18th of February or whenever I started doing this. I think it was like early to mid-Feb. Is just bring to you a selection of my personal highlights, really, and just look at some of the amazing guests and some of the kind of the nuggets of information that we've gleaned from these guys. When we started out, we were obviously recording this or streaming this live from our office, and the last couple of months I've been doing this from my spare room, aka my home office, which is where I am right now. And obviously, to begin with, we were sort of talking about what's going to happen when we all sort of go remotely. And one of the guests I had early on was a lady called Amy King. She was really interesting. She's a business psychologist. So she specializes in kind of the psyche of entrepreneurs and people who are working in companies and all that sort of stuff. And, if you're perhaps, slipping back into those old habits, you're sat in your pajamas watching this, basically, what I thought I'd do is start off with a clip with Amy talking about how to build a routine into your working day. A little bit of a refresher. I think we're all quite used to working from home now. Certainly, some of us are kind of feeling a little bit like they've got cabin fever. I know I am. Some days I love it. Some days I'm kind of really wishing I was back at the office. But yeah, here's Amy's take on, how to work from home. So if you've had let's say, because ultimately not every day is perfect. You especially when you're at work, sometimes you have a good day, sometimes you have a bad day, and it's just basically like forming a barrier, especially if you're working from home, to kind of stop the line blurring between, if you've had a bad day because you've lost a contract or you've been dealing with a difficult customer or whatever it might be, then trying to just sort of remind yourself some good things. And then before you go into your evening, so you're not then just, because I'm guilty of this, I do this all the time, where you've had a bad day at work and then you sat at night thinking about stuff, thinking, what an awful day or whatever. And it's just trying to create a separation between, the working day. And I think that's probably even more important when you're working from home, because like you said before, you don't have that physical separation of actually leaving the office and, the commute home or walking home, whatever it might be. So it's kind of like almost creating that kind of mental barrier instead.
It is. Yeah, it is. And it's mental, but you can also, in your own way, create a physical barrier. So going back to the techniques around what does a great average day look like, that there's almost an exercise I think everyone would benefit from right now, which is in this new world of whatever it is, and changes in how you work with people or working out. Maybe you can't quite think of a normal average day now, but what could your day look like? Because no one's deciding that for you in the way that it kind of happened before. So what time do you start? What is the physical transition? So maybe it is that you get into your work clothes. Maybe it is a certain part of your house that you want to sit to and work in. When you have lunch, how do you create the boundary from switching off from working to I'm having a break? Is it just you move from a kind of a desk to sitting on the sofa? It sounds so simple, but
that's actually what I did yesterday. Yeah.
Really?
I was
good.
Working from home, I thought, it's lunchtime now, I'm going to have lunch, watch the TV, sit on the sofa, and then when an hour later after I finished,
go back to the desk. You're right. It makes a difference, doesn't it? I made a conscious effort to do that because I was thinking exactly that. And weirdly, actually, when I have lunch at the office, I normally just sit at my desk and eat lunch. So I just thought, you might as well have my lunch hour away from the desk.
It's important. Yeah, I mean, I think that we pick up probably a few more things. Like obviously, when we're at work, we're with people, and so you kind of get this like mini unplanned break, so to speak, when you're at work. So that's good to hear. That's great. You've picked up on that already.
Well, it's interesting hearing it from you. I think it's quite cool, actually.
All right, so that was Amy Charlotte King from People Matter Technology, talking about, how to work from home effectively. And I think that idea of having a routine, making sure you get dressed in the morning, because sometimes we're all guilty of just sitting in our boxes working, and, kind of actually having a sort of physical separation between your workspace and your kind of home life is important. It's certainly served me really well over the past few months. Okay, so next up, how about the future of work? How are things going to change post-lockdown? And I know we're kind of talking a lot bit about this, and I'm sure you're sick of hearing about it. Don't worry, because later in this episode or this live stream, we've got some other stuff that's not just related to kind of the lockdown, but this is was really prominent at the time we actually started Working Lunch, because it was when everything was starting to escalate. So my next guest is Dan, and here's what he thinks about, the future of work. What do you think the future of work proposition looks like then? Do you think this is going to change everything? Or do you think people are just going to go back to what it was like before?
So, for a while I've been talking about the future of work stuff, and I've been talking around that proposition. And one of the parts of it was going to be, we're going to be doing more remote work. Now, of course, because of this situation, that's instantly been thrust upon us. I think remote working will go beyond the fad. It's a really interesting point you say, will people go back to? I really hope that this is a tipping point for so many things that I've been talking about for a long time. I really do, because there's a huge amount of waste in companies at the moment because people aren't engaged at work. It's something like 34% of people aren't engaged, the UK population aren't engaged at work. So in the future of work, what we might find is that it's almost like you work less hours, but you enjoy your work more. And I think what we're going to find is a lot more things like job sharing. A load more things like job sharing, and a load more things, load more ability from working remotely, but then engage. It's almost like the office will become like the market days of old. Like you'll go into the office, but only one day a week.
Yeah.
So you'll do your work and you'll bring it in and you'll say, "This is what I've done," and everyone will go, "Oh, well done. Let's all go for a beer. Fantastic. Let's put it all together."
So the office becomes more specifically just as a place of collaboration versus, somewhere you actually need to sit and actually get on with it. It's more like a kind of just treated like a meeting room, almost like a communal hall.
Exactly that, like the commons. So it's actually the opposite to the way that we're doing stuff at the moment. Like everyone goes home and it's like, oh, okay, cool. Well, now I can relax and da-da-da. And then you go back into the office and it's a high tension place. But actually it might be the opposite. You might really enjoy going to the office once a week because you haven't seen the people for ages. So you then go back and you connect with people and you can talk about it. Now, don't get me wrong. I work with the landing. The landing is a place, and you cannot, believe me, in tech and other things, you cannot get rid of the power of human interaction and collaboration.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Absolutely. I'm not saying the future is all remote work. It can, and if it is, we're going to be in a very dark place.
All right, that was Dan Sodergren there from Your Flock talking about his perspective on what the future of work is going to look like. That conversation with Dan actually was really interesting. He's a very insightful guy. He's also really good at getting appearances on TV. I always say this guy popping up on BBC News all the time. So thanks very much for Dan for coming on Working Lunch. Now, I've seen recently, I kind of mentioned this a bit before, getting cabin fever. We've been sat at home working away. Some people are obviously on furlough or, they're struggling. Certainly lots of people are out of work at the moment as well, which you're going to get onto in a bit. But, I think there's been a little bit of change recently to the lockdown, certainly here in the UK, which I think has kind of given people a little bit of a boost in terms of, there is probably a light at the end of the tunnel. So now I just want to cut back to Amy, where she's got some tips on how to sort of deal with this stuff that's going on right now.
What my concern is, I guess, it's too easy for just, you kind of just to fall into this kind of lax state where you're just communicating via email or, on Messenger, and you just sort of forget to communicate. And that's, I think, the main thing that you benefit from being in a kind of collaborative office-based environment is the communication. So it's really important that we, especially as you say, if you consider yourself a leader or a manager, kind of going the extra mile to get messages across and make sure you kind of communicating or staying in touch with the team. It's sort of, I think that's the thing is I suppose, especially as time progresses, it's probably easier to sort of lose touch, I guess.
Definitely. I mean, it's basic. It can be completely disorientating, this setup, if you've never done it before. So that the reinforcement and amplifying the messages is one thing, which helps with that. The second thing that I'll just add to that point is signposting, to the point about what's going on. I can't see the person who I used to see, and I don't know what they're doing, and I don't know how I fit as much, or that can start to be some of the anxieties that can come up. So if you're managing someone, if you're leading, try to signpost all the time, we're here now and we're going there, and to acknowledge where everyone's at and just the state of play, because that again just helps people feel like we all know where we are in this and what this means overall. I think just in terms of getting into the right mindset, we talk about physical health all the time. Mental health is exactly the same. And you'll have to think more proactively around not being drawn into the negative spaces, whether it's anxiety, like reading articles and getting sucked into it. Just give yourself the time to be informed when you need to, but create focused time and protect your time so that your mind is in the right place at the right time. So positive psychology has become really popular. I don't know how much you know about this, but there's the little techniques that you can introduce to your day that just set you up for success and help you end the day in the right way as well. A really simple thing you can do is start your day and just set one intention for your day. So if you think about what a great day is going to look like for you that day, it can be a simple goal. It could be as simple as be realistic with my time, or I want to truly listen to people today. Bring some consciousness to your day first, because you can just fall into your day when it's busy and just get sucked in. So bring consciousness first. If you can, take that a step further and just give yourself a minute to visualize. Actually close your eyes and think about what you want, what a good average day for you looks like today. So is it that you're going to have a moment to have a cup of tea at 11 o'clock with a biscuit like that? It could be as simple as that. Or is it you're going to have a call later in the day, or whatever you have coming up, and visualize how that looks like as from a success perspective. So just setting yourself up and that way can help. As you work through the day, so gratitude is something that sounds like the simplest and most common sense technique in the world, but it works hugely as an antidote to negative thinking. So no matter how bad a day feels, no matter how difficult it is, if you're struggling, if you can take a moment to think of 3 things that you're grateful for that day, obviously normally at the end of the day, it just helps you to reset your thinking, because again, when if you're struggling, or if you've got a lot on your plate, it's easy to not take stock and to let your own anxiety spheres take over, or to just run so fast that you start to get into stress and burnout situations.
Fantastic advice there from Amy from People Matter Technology. Now, if you're a freelancer, perhaps you've suffered a loss of business during the lockdown, you have to be a bit creative about, how you're perhaps offering services and what else you can do to sort of generate an income during this time. And as this became apparent, my brother's freelance, and I have a few friends who are out of work or they're freelance and they're really struggling. So I thought I'd get on a friend of mine, Mark Brown, who runs a company called Editor's Keys. And he works with a lot of freelancers as part of his business, particularly in the audio and video space. And I kind of wanted to get his take on how you could potentially flourish during this time as a freelancer. So here's Mark with his words of wisdom on what you can do as a freelancer during these unprecedented times. And I think it's quite an interesting sort of, that leads on nicely to sort of today's topic, where we want to talk about like how you can, if you're a freelancer, I think a lot of your customers are freelancers. There's obviously a lot of people who work in the industries that you serve, video producers, people who work in audio production, editing, podcast editing, music production, that sort of stuff. And also sort of singer-songwriters. there's a lot of people who are really struggling at the moment because suddenly the world's really been turned upside down in a very short space of time. A lot of freelancers are in a position where perhaps the contracts that they had, they're not getting as much revenue in. People are sort of being a bit more wary because of the economy is taking a big downturn. So I was kind of keen to get some ideas flowing today of how, if you're a freelancer, but, with these kind of skill sets, what can we do to sort of help increase the number of clients we're taking on board? I think let's kick things off with the idea of sort of YouTube video marketing and how you can advertise on YouTube, because I think that's really an interesting topic.
Yeah, I've spoken to a lot of freelancers on this, and I know people who have lost the entire year's worth of work that they had penciled into their calendar. So it's like a really hard time for a lot of freelancers out there, especially if you are like a video creator or photographer. I know wedding photographers, obviously every wedding has been cancelled. I mean, first of all, the tip I would give, if you are a video producer, content producer, I would recommend going back to speaking to all of your past clients, because you might have some past content already filmed, bits of B-roll. And with a lot of these businesses like restaurants and bars that are closed down, obviously you're not going to be able to go in and film or create massively great new adverts for them. But a lot of them are looking still to stay relevant in their customers' minds. So you might have some old content that you could go back to and say, look, I know you're going to be hit pretty hard at the moment, but do you want me to create some maybe like 15-second, 30-second Instagram bits, Facebook bits, just to keep you kind of relevant as we're going through this period? And I've seen a lot of people do that, and that's helped them. Just not, it's not going to be big money, but it's going to be work that's going to help you ticking over in this period.
That was Mark Brown there from Editor's Keys. So if you're a freelancer, how can you perhaps adjust your strategy? Here's a little bit more from Mark making some relevant points if you're a freelancer. And this was a really interesting conversation. I think just using the time to kind of be creative and start really thinking about maybe adjusting your strategy, because it kind of gives you a chance to actually take a step back, and perhaps you've got a sort of social media strategy that you've just been, churning out the same kind of content for the last couple of years. Like, what could you do differently? How have things changed? And ultimately as well, like you said, I think for freelancers, companies working with perhaps different clients, like updating your portfolio as well and looking at actually, what can you talk about that's been really interesting that you've been doing over the last year, particularly as a small business or a freelancer. I think it's about being proactive, isn't it, ultimately?
100%, yeah. Even little things like I'm trying to use the hour that I would normally drive to work to do exercise. Same for your business. I think now is the time to use that new time you have being locked down positively. Use those extra few minutes you have not walking to the office to maybe do something else. I mean, actually, I signed up to matchmaker.fm, and cool. As we've said on some of the videos we did, we haven't started a podcast yet. I'd never been a guest on a podcast, so I went onto there. I've emailed sort of 5 or 6 people, got a reply from 3. I've already been on 1 podcast.
Really great.
Invited for another 2. So stuff like that I didn't have the time for or wasn't ready to do.
What podcasts were they that you, out of interest? So
the one that I've recorded already is the Boss It podcast.
Cool. You're getting really good reactions. It's good to have some live feedback, actually. It's cool. One of the things I was going to mention was, if anyone wants to sign up to Matchmaker and if you've got an interest in getting booked onto other podcasts, now's a great time to do it. And I think as well, recording podcasts at the moment is a good time. You don't have to be there face to face. You could do it remotely, just like we're doing at the moment. So if you want to check it out, matchmaker.fm, totally free to join. You can connect using your LinkedIn or your Facebook account. Okay, that was Mark Brown from Editor's Keys giving his take on how you can sort of adjust your strategy as a business, and also what you can do as a freelancer if you suddenly find yourself out of work. Really important information and useful information there. So next up, I think it's very important right now as a business to focus on your sales strategy. Some businesses are flourishing, they're doing really well, and there's other businesses that are really struggling. So I thought what I'd do is get on one of a great expert in sales, a guy called Jonathan from Sales Geek, to kind of give his advice on, some effective selling strategies, selling techniques, and really just talk all things sales. Because if you're a business, if you're in any kind of business, sales is important. If you're running a podcast or you're building a radio station, sales is important, because even if you're not actually asking for money for a particular product or service, you've always got to be selling your brand and selling, your services, selling your stream, whatever it might be. Sales is such a crucial skill for everyone to have. So Here's what Jonathan had to say. What are your top pieces of advice for someone who says, you know, oh, I don't like selling, or I don't really know what to say? And I certainly think a lot of people, when they first get into business, I remember feeling like this quite a few years ago now, but, you know, I was more of an ideas guy. I was kind of learning a bit of code and that. I was kind of a bit more nerdy than I am now, I guess, a little less, educated when it comes to sales and marketing. But I remember feeling quite petrified at the time, thinking, oh, I've really no idea what to do, what to say in a sales situation.
And I think that the biggest thing that you mentioned is it's a sales situation. For me, the very first part for anyone new to sales, anyone that's struggling with sales, is because we put pressure on ourselves, or we get pressure from our leadership team that we need to be making sales. Which obviously is part of our role, and it's what we need to do. But if we look at this differently and sort of that first point of contact, so that first call, you're not allowed to sell anything to someone. You can't actually physically make a sale on that call. No. What we're trying to do here is see if they've got any problems, see if they've got any challenges, the person that we're speaking to. And if they have got problems or challenges, then see if we can help them with them. That changes for me the whole dynamic of how I'm looking at mentality perspective, because I'm not going into this thinking, I need to ask this person for this amount of money. At the end of this, I'm going to ask them for some money. Because what happens then is if you're doing your fact find correctly, you're asking the right sorts of questions. And also from your perspective, you're not thinking about that end revenue. It makes you a lot more curious. So if your first aim within the call isn't to try and sell them something, but is to find if they've got a problem or find if there's something that they're finding challenging, then that's the first aim of the call. And that for me changes the whole dynamic about how you'd even think about even cold calling or social outreach to someone. You're not trying to sell, you're trying to see if you've got any problems.
That was Jonathan from Sales Geek giving his take on kind of what sales is and how to kind of start approaching it. I know it's quite intimidating to begin with for a lot of entrepreneurs and businesses. I remember when I was starting out, you know, I was like, oh God, I don't want to sell. I'm kind of like scared of what people, and also you're scared of rejection. I remember being very scared of rejection. So interesting points there. Now, if you've just joined us, this is the last working lunch in the series. And what we're doing today is just having a quick recap on some of the most interesting conversations I had. Lots of content, which unfortunately I can't include today because we're kind of limited to a sort of 45-minute window. But if you've just tuned in and you've perhaps been a regular listener, I just firstly want to say thank you for joining me, and thanks for sort of sticking with me since February. We are going to be back with this later in the year, so don't worry. I just need a little bit of a break because, as you can imagine, doing this every single week, plus everything else that's going on, plus running 2 businesses, and the fact I'm recording 30 podcasts within 30 days right now, I just feel like I need a little bit to take a step back from doing working lunch. But yeah, I don't have an exact date of when it's going to return. Probably kind of, I'll maybe have a month and a half off, something like that. So sometime later in the year, probably July time. If you have any questions, by the way, I'm going to maybe do a little bit of a Q&A at the end. If they're kind of relevant to what the topics have been discussed on the sort of clips I've been playing, please feel free to add them in the comments. We're going out live on LinkedIn. If you want to shout out, also don't mind doing that. If you've got something interesting going on, I've seen Sam Sethi's just commented. So Sam, I'll be doing a little bit of a shout out for you at the end of this. But if anyone else has got anything to say, feel free to add it into the comments and we'll try and get through some stuff at the end. So we've talked about sales. We've talked about what to do in lockdown, how to sort of manage your stress levels, make sure you're productive. Just goes to show everything that we've covered over the past few months. Really huge variety of topics. It's been fascinating. So kind of we get towards the end of these clips now. I've got a few more for you here. Next up, I'm just going to give you a couple of clips from last week's working lunch from George, and he's founder of Soul Supplier. You know, he started his business on a shoestring budget after working in recruitment, and he's now very successful. He's done brilliantly well. He's got a website that's kind of really cool. It's on brand, and you know, he basically is working with some of the top sportswear brands in the world, so the likes of Nike and Adidas. He even interviewed David Beckham on his podcast, which I think is absolutely fantastic. So, you know, we kind of started last week's conversation with, can you start a business for less than £100 or $100 right now? And, you know, I think at the moment, if you're furloughed or you're out of work, there's actually a big opportunity to do that because you've got a lot of time on your hands. So here's what George had to say about that specific topic. Can you start a business for under £100. So let's kick off today's session. So obviously when you started the Sole Supplier, you started on a shoestring budget. So first topic today, how to start a business with less than $100 or £100. Is that something you can still do?
Something you can still do, yeah. I think you could actually do it with less, couldn't you? Because if you've got a passion and you want to communicate that passion through social media, you can set up an Instagram profile and a TikTok account for free. And you can start creating content on one of those channels for free. But my strategy was always create a website, because a website is an asset. You know, I was always about having that asset rather than relying on social channels, which we do very heavily, but that's a small part of the bigger picture. But, you know, you can buy a domain name. Like we was talking a little bit about this. You can buy a domain name. You can set up a WordPress blog. You can get a nice theme for like £20 and you can begin writing articles, probably for around £80 altogether, all in.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Well, that's nice and quick. A brief advice from George there. You know, you can start a business for less than £100. It's really just about determination and thinking of a good idea and just kind of staying focused. That's my opinion. You know, I'm very similar to George in that, you know, when I started out, I did not have a big budget. I was 16 years old and I just managed to get my dad to get me a credit card so I could pay for stuff on the internet. And I didn't run up a load of debt on it or anything. I paid it off every month. But that was really all I had to get started. Okay, so moving on. Once you've kind of grown your business, you know, George has been through a very similar process, and by the sounds of it, very similar kind of growth curve to my companies. You know, you have to sort of get to a stage. You started your business, and then you need to start delegating. When you start ready to hiring people, it could be freelancers, it could be temporary, you know, part-time staff, or it can even be full-time staff. But how do you then take a step back of kind of wearing all the hats, you know, being the sales guy, the marketing guy, the support guy, the CEO, the founder, the technical guy? How do you then step back and actually start, you know, forming a good solid team?
As the founder or as the CEO, you actually need to be doing the things that make the business grow, rather than constantly holding on to the things that you're good at because you started doing them. But you should be delegating and letting go. And that's, I think, like a common tough thing for everyone, isn't it? Even senior team members, they get so good at something, they don't want to let their baby go. They don't want to let that task go because they worry it might not be done as well.
I remember feeling exactly like that a few years back, you know, because especially in the early days when it's you on your own, you definitely have to wear many hats, and you kind of become a jack of all trades and master of none. I found it really refreshing when I'd hire people who would actually be like, in the early days, I learned to code somewhat, right? And I used to think I was a really good developer. When I first started hiring developers, John, who I hired to begin with, who's now our CTO, I hired him and I was like, this guy's amazing. And I thought, you know, everything I thought about myself as a developer was completely wrong. I was rubbish. I think that's the thing when you get to that stage where, you know, you've got to accept that actually you're not always the best at everything as well. I think you can kind of, it's good to hire people always who impress and who kind of know more than you. I think that's kind of the key to growing a business as well. Yeah, I think I agree with myself there. George was a great guy, really, really interesting to speak to him. So next up, I'm going to move on to something that's very close to me. You know, as you know, I run radio.co, podcast.co, matchmaker.fm. Those are the 3 different platforms that I currently are operating, and I've had various other businesses in the past. But podcasting, radio, really, really close to my heart. I was really privileged to get to speak to Des from Wants Media. He is previously from a radio background. He now helps lots of businesses with their sort of podcasting efforts, and he also produces videos for them as well. So we had a really interesting, you know, conversation, a bit of a nerd out about the subject of radio, about the subject of podcasting. So first of all, you know, this is Des's take on what is the difference between radio and podcasting. So you've got, obviously you come from a radio background. I think it'd be an interesting thing to sort of kick off. What are the key differences, do you think, between radio and podcasting? And do you think podcasting is becoming a threat to the radio industry?
I think podcasting is an evolution of radio. They are different. I think there are a lot of advantages to podcasting. It's certainly, you know, in an age where we like to make sure that technology is in the hands of consumers and people can make their own content. Podcasting is a brilliant way of being able to do that. The thing is that it doesn't have any of the restrictions that come with radio. And whether you're BBC or in the commercial sector, there are editorial policies and things like that you have to adhere to. In podcasts, you can just go and say, I want to record a podcast about something, I'm going to make it, and off it goes.
But what is it about audio that is so important? I think there's kind of, I like the fact that sort of Des has said, podcasting is an evolution of radio. But I think, audio is here to stay. And people always ask me this as well, like, oh, you've got a radio platform. Is radio still relevant now? Well, yes, it is. And in fact, we've seen huge increase in listener numbers over the past sort of 3-4 months. Certainly since the start of the year, we're seeing pretty much double the traffic to our radio stations, all the radio stations are using the radio.co platform, which is fascinating because it shows that it's just such a powerful medium and it's still prominent as ever. So what is Des's take on why audio is so powerful? Let's go into it. Why do you think audio is so powerful? What's your perspective on that?
It's the kind of analogy I use is that if you watch a horror movie with the volume turned down, it doesn't become as scary. The fear in a horror movie is driven by the sound design and the silences and things like that. That's a good good way of explaining the power of audio. We are as humans, we listen, we talk, we communicate. All of that is audio based. You don't need to see someone to be able to do that. Being able to see somebody is an added bonus, but in reality it's about what we're hearing and what we're saying. So that defines audio.
All right, so there we go. That kind of wraps up the clips I've got prepared for you today. Some of the favorite interview or the favorite moments from the different interviews that I've done over the past 3 months. So without further ado, I'm going to sort of finish signing this off with a couple of shout outs. First of all, if you've not already checked out matchmaker.fm, it's a fantastic platform at the moment. If you want to get booked on more podcasts as a guest, or if you have a podcast and you want to find more interesting guests, go and check it out. It's totally free to sign up and use. Really simple to get started on there. And most people who sign up seem to get results within the first sort of 24 hours of being on the platform. I'm actually embarking on a podcast tour at the moment. I'm doing 30 podcasts within 30 days. I've got another recording for a podcast actually at 3:00 today. So it's really exciting. And it's a great way of, just driving attention to a particular service, a product, or even just yourself. If you've got a specific message that you want to spread, podcasts are a powerful medium to do so. I want to give a quick shout out to Sam, who's tuned in, Sam Sethi. Along with a colleague of his, Mid to Dial, they are organizing a virtual podcast festival. You can check out all the details and you can get tickets. It's going to be held online, obviously. Some great speakers they've got lined up. Podcastfestival.live is the address. So podcastfestival.live, podcastfestival.live. Trying to get my words out here. Go and check that out. It's going to be really good. I'm going to be tuned in. I'm sure that a lot of you guys watching are going to be as well. And also, just want to shout out to radio.co. We have started launching our new website. We're kind of not completely refreshing it, but we've updated some of the elements of the website. So we're going to be pushing out some changes. So our brand new homepage has just been launched today, looking amazing. So great job on all the radio.co team pulling that together. Really excited to sort of see the website evolve because we've not updated it for a couple of years. Right, now we're going down the list of guests. I just want to say thank you to everybody who has given up an hour or so of their time over the past few months to talk to me on a Wednesday afternoon. It's been really fascinating speaking to you all. So from the top, Dan Smith was my first conversation back in February sometime. I don't remember his exact date. The social media guy. Fraser Cotterill from Fraggle Productions, Adam Hunt, White Label Comedy, Steve Bent from Refractive Media, Todd Chambers from Uproar Media, Amy Woods from Content 10X, Sam Jones from Tuna Fish Media, Amy Charlotte King from People Matter Technology, Druv Metha from Ormont, Austin Belkak from Cultivated Culture. Thank you to you all. Mark Brown from Editor's Keys. Obviously, we've seen Mark earlier. James Day from JagX. Dan Sodergren from Your Flock. Jonathan Finch from Sales Geek. Des Paul from Watson Media. And finally, George Sullivan from Soul Supplier. How many have we got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I should have counted these. 13, 14, 15, 16 conversations. So the last 16 weeks we've been doing this. So yes, definitely now time for a well-deserved break from working lunch. As I say, we'll be back later in the year. If you want to connect with me on social media, maybe you're not connected on all of my platforms, go to jamesm.com/connect. The links to YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. They're all on there. jamesm.com/connect. You can connect with me on there. So without further ado, I'm going to sign off now. Thanks very much for tuning in today. Been a pleasure. And also, if you have any questions, if you're thinking about starting a podcast or starting a radio station, please feel free to reach out to us over on podcast.co and radio.co. All right, take it easy.